No one in that restaurant knew the truth. Within the next 2 hours, a powerful crime empire would lose millions, a human trafficking network would collapse, and a man believed to be dead would reveal himself as a traitor. But none of that started with guns, sirens, or violence. It started with a child, a little girl, no older than 8, sitting quietly at a crowded restaurant table. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't cry for help. Instead, she wrote a single word on a napkin, crumpled it in her small hand, and sent it sliding across the floor. That napkin stopped at the shoe of the most dangerous man in the city, a mafia boss, a killer, a man everyone feared. Out of hundreds of people in the room, she chose him, and that choice would change everything. Because when a child asks a monster for help, one of 2 things happens. Either the monster proves who he truly is, or the world burns as he becomes something else entirely. Vincent Torino sat at table 15 with his back angled slightly away from the main entrance. It was not arrogance. It was survival. A man who had lived as long as he had in the shadows of power learned early that empty space behind you was an invitation to death. Every movement in the restaurant reflected softly in the polished surface of his wineglass. Every sound reached him with unnatural clarity, yet his face remained calm, unreadable, carved from years of discipline and violence. He had not come to Romano's for dinner. He had come to meet a ghost. Marcus DeLuca had been pronounced dead 6 months ago, burned beyond recognition in a warehouse explosion that erased $3 million in product and nearly ignited a war between crime families. The world accepted the story easily. Men like Marcus died all the time. Fires, bullets, accidents. Clean endings were rare, but believable deaths were not. Vincent, however, had never believed it. Ghosts did not empty bank accounts. Dead men did not move money through shell companies in Miami. And childhood friends did not disappear without leaving fingerprints behind. Marcus had been many things, but careless was not one of them. The clock on the far wall ticked softly. 9:17 p.m. Marcus was late. In Vincent's world, lateness carried only 2 meanings, betrayal or death. He had built his empire on understanding that distinction, on responding swiftly before either one could rot into weakness. His fingers tapped once against the tablecloth, a small, controlled movement that none of the surrounding diners noticed. Families laughed over pasta, couples leaned close, whispering secrets over candlelight. Somewhere near the bar, silverware clinked against plates, life continuing in blissful ignorance. Then something touched the tip of his shoe. Light, barely there. Vincent froze. He did not look down immediately. Years of instinct held him still, scanning reflections, watching shadows, reading the room for threats that moved faster than thought, when nothing exploded and no gunshot followed. He finally lowered his gaze. A crumpled napkin rested against the polished leather of his shoe. For a moment, irritation flickered. Trash found its way across restaurant floors all the time. A careless waiter, a child playing. He nudged it slightly with his foot, ready to push it away and return his attention to the absence of Marcus. Then he saw the color. Purple. Vincent bent slowly, his movements deliberate, casual enough to look like a man adjusting his pant leg. His fingers closed around the napkin, and as he unfolded it, the noise of the restaurant seemed to dull, as though the world had stepped back to watch. One word, written in uneven, trembling letters. Help. Something cold and sharp slid through his chest, precise as a blade. Vincent Torino had felt fear many times in his life, but this was not fear. This was recognition, the kind that came when instinct screamed before reason had time to argue. He lifted his head. Across the room, near the hostess stand, a little girl stood beside her mother. She could not have been more than 8. Dark hair fell neatly against her shoulders, too carefully brushed, as if someone had insisted on order where none existed. Her small hands were folded in front of her, fingers laced together tightly, knuckles pale. Behind her stood a man in a tailored leather jacket. His hand rested on the girl's shoulder. Not gently, possessively. Vincent's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. He had spent decades studying men like this one, reading intention in posture, danger in the angle of a wrist. The grip was wrong, too firm, too deliberate. Not the protective touch of a father or guardian, but the controlling hold of someone reminding a child where she belonged. The girl looked straight at him. Most children looked away when they met his gaze. Even adults did. There was something in Vincent's eyes that warned people off. Something sharpened by years of blood and command. This child did not flinch. She held his stare, her expression carefully blank, as if she had practiced wearing it. She did not cry. She did not mouth words. She simply looked at him as though he were the final door in a hallway that had already burned behind her. "If you don't help," her eyes seemed to say, "there is no one else." The man behind her leaned down slightly, murmuring something near her ear. The girl stiffened, just for a second, before forcing her shoulders to relax again. Her mother, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and trembling hands, stared at the table in front of her as if the wood itself were the only thing holding her upright. Vincent felt a memory stir, uninvited. He was 12 again, standing outside a pizzeria, watching his father bleed onto the sidewalk while grown men argued over territory as though a life had not just ended between them. He remembered the helplessness, the clarity of realizing that the world did not protect the innocent by default. Someone had to choose to do it. The girl's gaze flickered down for a heartbeat, then back to his. A question passed between them, silent and dangerous. Would he choose? Vincent folded the napkin carefully and slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket, right over his heart. His expression did not change, but something inside him shifted, subtle as the tightening of a trigger. This was not part of the plan. Marcus was still missing. The betrayal he had come here to confront remained unresolved. Every second Vincent spent distracted increased the risk that his ghost would vanish again. Forever. Power demanded focus. Emotion was a luxury men like him could not afford. And yet, he watched the man's hand tighten on the girl's shoulder, watched the mother swallow back tears she did not dare release, watched a child who should have been thinking about desserts and crayons instead calculate her chances of survival. Vincent Torino had done many unforgivable things in his life. He had ordered deaths, ruined families, and slept soundly afterward. But there were lines he did not cross. There were rules he did not break. Children were one of them. His phone vibrated softly against the table. A message from Tony, posted near the entrance. No sign of Marcus. "Want us to move?" Vincent did not reply immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the girl, who now stood perfectly still, as if movement itself might shatter whatever fragile hope she had placed in him. In a room filled with strangers, she had chosen him, not the waiter, not the families, not the couples laughing over wine. The most dangerous man in the city. And Vincent understood, with chilling clarity, why she had made that choice. Because monsters recognized other monsters. And sometimes, only a monster was powerful enough to stop something worse. The clock ticked again. 9:18 p.m. Vincent Torino leaned back in his chair, his decision forming quietly, irrevocably. Whatever happened next would not stay contained within the walls of Romano's. Blood, money, loyalty, and secrets were about to collide, and the first domino had already fallen. All because a child had believed that the man everyone feared might be the one person who would not turn away. And in that moment, Vincent knew one thing with absolute certainty. This night would cost him far more than he had come prepared to lose. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. Vincent did not look away from the girl after slipping the napkin into his jacket. He had learned long ago that once you broke eye contact in moments like this, you surrendered control. Around him, the restaurant continued its careless rhythm, unaware that something invisible and dangerous had just entered the air. Laughter rose, glasses clinked. A waiter called out an order near the kitchen, yet beneath it all, Vincent sensed a tension tightening, thin as wire, ready to snap. The man behind the girl finally removed his hand from her shoulder, but the release was an illusion. His fingers hovered close, a warning rather than mercy. He leaned toward the mother, speaking in a low voice meant only for her, though Vincent caught fragments carried by instinct more than sound. Schedules, timing, hurry. The woman nodded too quickly, the way people did when they were agreeing, not because they wanted to, but because refusal had already been punished once before. Vincent shifted slightly in his chair, angling his body just enough to see the reflection of their table in the dark surface of the wine bottle beside him. He did not need a clear view. He needed patterns. The man's posture was wrong for a family dinner. Too alert, too contained. He scanned the room the way professionals did, not with panic, but with calculation. Whoever he was, he expected trouble eventually. He simply did not expect it to come from a child. The girl lowered her gaze now, staring at the floor as if the moment had passed. Vincent knew better. Desperation did not fade that quickly. It simply learned to wait. He watched her hands curl into fists, then relax again. A small exercise in control, far too mature for someone her age. Something inside his chest tightened, unfamiliar and unwelcome. He had spent years convincing himself that sentiment was weakness. Caring too deeply blurred judgment. And blurred judgment got men killed. Yet here he was, measuring the distance between tables, counting exits, calculating how fast things could unravel if he made the wrong move. He had not done that for a stranger in a long time. Certainly not for a child. The man at the table stood abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor, sharp enough to make the girl flinch. "I'm going to take a call," he said, his tone casual, almost bored. His eyes flicked toward Vincent for half a second too long. Recognition flashed there, not of identity, but of threat, predator to predator. Vincent did not move. The man walked toward the back of the restaurant, and as he turned, Vincent caught the brief outline beneath his jacket. A weapon, concealed, practiced, carried by someone who had used it before. The girl's mother watched him go, her face draining of color, her hand reaching instinctively for her daughter's. She squeezed too tightly, then loosened her grip, as if afraid even affection might draw attention. Vincent's phone vibrated again. "Tony." Plate came back clean on first pass. "But something feels off. Car's running." Vincent typed a short response beneath the table, his movements minimal. "Stay where you are, eyes open." He slid the phone back into his pocket and exhaled slowly through his nose. Whatever this was, it was not spontaneous. The car idling outside, the armed escort, the urgency in the man's voice, all of it pointed toward a plan already in motion, and plans like these rarely included second chances. The girl glanced up again, her eyes darting toward the back hallway where the man had disappeared. Fear crept back into her expression, no longer contained, no longer masked. She was counting minutes now. She knew time mattered. Vincent's mind moved quickly, assembling possibilities. If he intervened too openly, the man might panic and force an exit. If he waited too long, the girl and her mother would be gone, swallowed by a system designed to erase people quietly. He considered involving the staff, but the thought vanished as soon as it formed, untrained, unaware. They would only make things worse. The man returned sooner than expected, and he was not alone. A second figure followed him, shorter, broader, moving with the heavy confidence of someone accustomed to violence. Military? Vincent guessed. Or former law enforcement. His jacket hung loose, deliberately hiding whatever lay beneath. He did not sit. He stood behind the table, positioned perfectly to watch the room and control the mother and child at once. The girl's shoulders stiffened. Her mother's breathing grew shallow. Vincent felt the last piece fall into place. This was not a family dispute. This was not a bad man making bad decisions. This was organized, efficient, the kind of operation that treated people as assets rather than lives. He had seen it before, in shipping manifests and coded conversations, in whispers that drifted through the underworld like rot. Human trafficking. And tonight, it had walked into his city and chosen a crowded restaurant as a transfer point. Anger flared, sharp and immediate, not the reckless fury of youth, but the controlled burn of a man who knew exactly how much damage he could do. He kept his face neutral, though his fingers curled once against the tablecloth, then stilled. The girl's crayon rolled off the table and clattered softly against the floor. The sound cut through Vincent with surgical precision. She bent down to retrieve it, her movements small, careful. As she straightened, her eyes found his again. This time, she did not write. She did not signal. Her lips moved silently. "Please." It was not a demand. It was not even hope. It was trust. Vincent felt something inside him shift irrevocably. A line crossed, one he could not uncross even if he wanted to. He reached for his phone again, this time not hiding the movement. His gaze never left the girl as he typed a single message. Change of plans. Tony's reply came almost instantly. Boss Vincent stood. The movement was subtle, unhurried, but it rippled outward all the same. His men felt it before they saw it, bodies adjusting, attention sharpening, across the room. The second man's eyes narrowed. He sensed the change too, though he did not yet understand it. Vincent smoothed his jacket and took a step toward the aisle, his path angling not toward the family's table, but toward the hallway leading to the restrooms. He needed one more piece of information, one more confirmation before everything exploded. As he passed close enough to hear, the standing man spoke quietly to his partner. Flight's still on. 11 sharp. No delays. Vincent did not slow. 11. Time had just become a weapon. Behind him, the girl watched his retreating figure with a mixture of terror and fragile hope, unaware that the man she had chosen was already dismantling the night in his mind, piece by piece. And somewhere far from the restaurant, in a place Vincent could not yet see, Marcus was making his own move, confident that Vincent Torino was distracted by a problem too small to matter. He was wrong. Very wrong. Maria Rodriguez had mastered the art of breathing without being noticed. Each inhale was shallow, each exhale measured, as if too much air might draw attention. She sat perfectly straight in her chair, hands folded in her lap, eyes lowered to the untouched plate before her. From the outside, she looked like any tired mother enduring a long dinner. Inside, she was counting seconds, rehearsing apologies she did not understand, preparing herself for consequences she had already tasted. The man beside her spoke again, his voice low and controlled. He did not raise it. He never had to. Control lived in the calmness of his tone, in the way his words did not ask for agreement, but assumed it. Maria nodded when he spoke, even when she did not fully hear him. Nodding was safer than questions. Silence was safer than truth. Across from her, Emma sat still, too still. Maria's heart tightened every time she noticed it. Children were not meant to sit like that. Back straight, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. Emma had learned this posture in the past 3 days. Learned it the way people learned fear, quickly and without explanation. Maria hated herself for noticing how well her daughter had adapted. She remembered the knock on the door. Not loud, not violent, polite, almost respectful. 2 men standing in the hallway, smiling as if they were neighbors asking for sugar. They had spoken her name correctly. They had known where Emma went to school. They had known she worked double shifts on weekends. Information delivered like kindness. "We just need you to come with us," they had said. A short trip. Maria had understood immediately. She had seen stories like this on the news, half-finished reports that faded from memory because they were too ugly to hold for long. Women and children who vanished quietly. Families who waited for answers that never came. She had wanted to scream then. She had wanted to run. But Emma had been standing behind her, clutching her shirt. So Maria had smiled. She had nodded. She had learned how to stay alive. In the restaurant, Emma's small knee brushed against hers beneath the table. The contact was barely there, but Maria felt it like a plea. She wanted to reach down, to squeeze her daughter's hand, to whisper that everything would be okay. Instead, she kept her hands still. Affection, she had learned, could be used as leverage. The second man shifted behind them, his presence heavy, watchful. Maria sensed him more than she saw him, a weight pressing down on the air. He did not speak. He did not need to. His silence was sharper than threats. Her eyes lifted without permission, drawn to the man at table 15. She did not know who he was. She only knew that Emma had chosen him. That knowledge terrified her more than the men sitting beside her, because if Emma was wrong, there would be no second attempt. Maria's gaze dropped again, but not before she noticed something subtle. The man at table 15 had moved, not dramatically, just enough. His posture had changed, the way predators adjusted when they sensed movement in the dark. He was listening, not with his ears, but with his entire body. The man beside Maria leaned closer. "We're leaving soon," he said softly. "Finish your water." She lifted the glass, her hand trembling despite her effort to control it. The rim pressed against her lips, and she forced herself to swallow. The water tasted like nothing. Or perhaps she could no longer taste at all. Emma's crayon slipped from the table and hit the floor. The sound made Maria flinch. She reached instinctively toward her daughter, then stopped herself halfway, fingers curling back into her palm. Emma slid off her chair slightly, retrieving the crayon with careful movements. When she straightened, her eyes met the man at table 15 again. Maria followed her gaze this time. For a fleeting moment, something passed between them. Not words, not signals. Understanding. Maria felt it then, sharp and sudden. Hope. It scared her more than fear ever had. Hope made people reckless. Hope made people believe in miracles. And miracles were dangerous things to trust. She wanted to pull Emma close, to tell her not to look, not to believe, not to risk angering men who did not forgive mistakes. But Emma had already decided. The man at table 15 stood. Maria's breath caught painfully in her chest. Every instinct screamed that this was the wrong moment. That movement would trigger something terrible. The standing man behind them noticed too. His shoulders tightened, his stance shifting almost imperceptibly. The air thickened. The man from table 15 walked past them, close enough that Maria caught the faint scent of cologne and something colder beneath it. Power, perhaps, or violence. He did not look at her. He did not look at Emma. And yet Maria felt seen in a way she had not since this nightmare began. She heard him speak quietly as he passed, words not meant for her ears. 11 sharp. Her stomach dropped. 11 meant finality. The man disappeared toward the back hallway, and the tension did not leave with him. If anything, it grew heavier, settling into Maria's bones. The man beside her checked his watch. The second man scanned the room again, his gaze sharp, suspicious. Emma's small hand found Maria's under the table. This time, Maria did not pull away. Her daughter's fingers were cold, but steady. "Mom," Emma whispered, barely audible. "I did what you told me." Maria's throat closed. She had told Emma many things over the years. To be polite, to be brave, to trust adults. None of them felt like the right answer now. "What did you do?" Maria whispered back, fear and love tangling painfully in her chest. Emma did not answer. She only squeezed Maria's hand once, then let go. Across the room, the man at table 15 reappeared, his expression unchanged, his presence suddenly undeniable. His eyes met Maria's for the first time, and something unspoken passed between them. A promise, or a warning. Maria did not know which. All she knew was that whatever happened next would not be quiet. The fragile stillness she had relied on was cracking, and once it broke, there would be no hiding behind silence anymore. She straightened in her chair, drawing a slow, careful breath. For the first time in days, Maria Rodriguez prepared herself not just to survive, but to witness. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the terror, she prayed that her daughter had chosen the right man to believe in. Vincent stopped just short of the restroom corridor, letting the muted sounds of running water and muffled voices mask his presence. He did not need the privacy. He needed the pause. Decisions of consequence required stillness, a moment where instinct and calculation aligned instead of colliding. He rested one hand lightly against the marble wall, eyes unfocused, mind working through angles and outcomes with ruthless precision. 11 o'clock. The time echoed in his thoughts like a verdict. Flights were not booked last minute. Routes were chosen carefully. Transfers happened in places where no one looked too closely. A restaurant full of witnesses was not a mistake. It was camouflage. Normalcy was the most effective cover violence had ever known. Vincent reached into his jacket and touched the napkin once, feeling the soft resistance of paper beneath his fingers. He did not take it out. He did not need to. The word had already carved itself into him. Help. He exhaled slowly and brought his phone up, angling the screen so its glow would not carry. He dialed a number he had not used in over a year. The line connected after 2 rings. "Morrison," came the voice on the other end, tired and wary. "This better be good." "It's Vincent," he said quietly. A pause, then a sigh that carried history. "I was hoping you'd stay dead to my voicemail." "I need a favor," Vincent replied, ignoring the remark. "And before you say no, remember who kept your daughter out of trouble last spring." The silence stretched, thick with unspoken debts. "What's going on, Romanos? 5th Street. Woman and child. 2 armed escorts. They're moving tonight. Flight at 11. "You're asking me to rate a restaurant based on a feeling," Morrison said, skepticism sharpening his tone. "That's not how this works." "I'm not guessing," Vincent replied. "And I don't lie about kids." Another pause, heavier this time. "I can send a unit for a wellness check." "Quiet. That's all I can promise." "That's enough," Vincent said. "Make sure they don't spook." He ended the call before Morrison could change his mind. When Vincent turned back toward the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. It was subtle, but unmistakable to anyone who lived by instinct. The 2 men at the family's table were no longer relaxed. They were watching, listening, preparing. The second man had adjusted his stance, feet positioned for movement, weight balanced. Professionals always betrayed themselves in moments like this. Maria sat rigid, her chin lifted now, eyes no longer fixed on the table. Fear had given way to something quieter, steadier. Resolve, perhaps, or acceptance. Vincent wondered which frightened her more. Emma did not look at him. She stared at the doorway. Vincent followed her gaze and saw the black sedan idling outside through the front window. Headlights dimmed, engine humming softly. The driver remained unseen, but the message was clear. They were on a schedule. Tony's voice crackled softly through the earpiece hidden beneath Vincent's collar. Plates tied to a shell company. Warehouse in the industrial district. Same name on 3 other vehicles. This isn't small time. "Boss, I know," Vincent murmured. "Your call," Tony added. "Say the word." Vincent did not answer immediately. His eyes returned to the child. She had not looked back at him since he moved away. She had done her part. Whatever happened next was no longer hers to control. He stepped forward. The sound of his shoes against the floor drew attention, though few realized why. Power did not announce itself loudly. It altered gravity. People turned instinctively, conversations softening as Vincent approached the table. He stopped just far enough away to appear polite, close enough that retreat would be difficult. "Excuse me," he said evenly, his voice calm, almost courteous. "I believe your daughter dropped this." He held out the napkin. Time slowed. The first man's hand moved an inch toward his jacket. The second man's shoulders tensed. Maria's breath caught audibly, a small, broken sound that cut through Vincent sharper than any weapon. Emma looked up at last, her eyes widening, then softening in recognition. "I don't know who you are," the first man said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "But you should mind your business." Vincent's gaze never left him. "I am..." The words landed quietly, but they carried weight. Around the room, Vincent felt his men shift into place. Not visibly, not dramatically, but with purpose. Paths closed. Exits became watched. The restaurant remained intact, unaware of how quickly it had transformed into a controlled space. "This is a misunderstanding," the second man said, his voice tight. "We're just a family having dinner." Vincent glanced at Emma. Families don't need armed escorts. The man's smile vanished. Sirens sounded faintly in the distance, not close enough to cause panic, but near enough to be heard by those listening for them. The first man swore under his breath. His phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it. "Sit," Vincent said softly. It was not a request. Something in his tone convinced them. Chairs scraped as the men complied, tension radiating off them like heat. Vincent pulled out a chair and sat, uninvited, his presence anchoring the moment. "No one's leaving," he continued. "Not until some friends arrive." Maria stared at him, confusion and fragile hope battling across her face. Emma reached for her mother's hand again, this time openly, without fear of reprimand. Maria held on. Outside, the sirens grew louder. Inside, the first man leaned forward, eyes blazing. "You have no idea who you're interfering with." Vincent met his gaze, unflinching. "You have no idea who you chose to do this in front of." The doors at the front of the restaurant opened, and 2 plainclothes detectives stepped inside, scanning the room with practiced calm. Vincent did not look at them. He did not need to. The balance had already tipped. As the officers approached the table, Emma squeezed her mother's hand and leaned close, whispering something Vincent could not hear. Maria nodded, tears finally spilling, silent and relieved. For the first time that night, Vincent allowed himself a single thought that was not strategy. Whatever this cost him, it would be worth it. Because the night had already crossed a point of no return. The detectives moved with deliberate calm, badges visible but not brandished, their presence carefully measured so as not to ignite panic. To the rest of the restaurant, they looked like two men responding to a minor disturbance. To the people at the table, they looked like the end of a carefully controlled lie. "Good evening," the older detective said, his voice neutral. "Practiced. We received a call about a possible situation here. Mind if we ask a few questions?" The first man straightened in his chair, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges. There must be some mistake. "Officer, we're just finishing dinner." Vincent watched without speaking, his attention fixed not on the men, but on Maria and Emma. Maria's face had gone pale, her hands shaking openly now, the effort of silence finally collapsing under the weight of possibility. Emma sat upright, eyes wide but clear, as if something inside her had steadied the moment the uniforms appeared. The second detective's gaze lingered on the child longer than protocol required. Experience had taught him that children often told the truth without knowing they were doing so. "Ma'am," he said gently, turning to Maria, "are you here of your own free will?" Maria's mouth opened. No sound came out. Years of fear pressed against her throat, all the warnings she had swallowed repeating themselves at once. "Don't speak. Don't draw attention. Don't make them angry." Her eyes flicked to the man beside her, then to the one standing behind, then back to the detective. She shook her head slightly, barely perceptible. The man beside her leaned forward. "She's just tired," he said quickly. "We've had a long day." Emma stood. The scrape of her chair against the floor was small, but it cut through the room like a blade. Maria gasped, reaching instinctively for her daughter. But Emma was already stepping forward, hands clenched at her sides, her voice shaking but strong. "They're lying," she said. "They took us from our house." The restaurant seemed to exhale all at once. The first man rose abruptly, his chair tipping back. "Sit down," he snapped at Emma, his hand moving toward his jacket. He did not make it halfway. Tony appeared at his side like a wall, one massive hand gripping the man's wrist, twisting just enough to make the threat vanish without spectacle. The second man lunged toward the aisle, but Vincent was already there, his movement smooth and economical. He did not strike. He redirected. A sharp shove sent the man crashing into an empty table, glass shattering as diners screamed and ducked away. "Enough!" the older detective barked, drawing his weapon as his partner moved to shield Maria and Emma. "On the ground, now." This time, the men obeyed. The chaos lasted less than 30 seconds, but when it settled, everything had changed. Chairs lay overturned. A wine glass rolled slowly across the floor, spilling dark red onto white tile. Maria collapsed into her seat, sobbing quietly as an officer knelt beside her, murmuring reassurances. Emma clung to her mother, her small body trembling now that she no longer had to be brave. Vincent stood a few steps back, his heart pounding harder than it had in years. Not from danger, from proximity. He had come too close to losing control, and he knew it. Violence came easily to him. Restraint did not. The detectives worked quickly, cuffs snapping closed, weapons secured. "Sweetheart," the younger detective said softly to Emma. "Can you tell me your name, Emma?" she whispered. "Emma Rodriguez?" And your mom, Maria, lifted her head, wiping tears from her face. "Maria," she said hoarsely. "Maria Rodriguez." "How long have you been with them?" the detective asked. 3 days. Emma answered before her mother could. "They said we were going on a trip, but I didn't want to go. I knew something was wrong." Vincent felt a surge of cold fury at the simplicity of it. 3 days. 3 days of fear no one had seen. No one had stopped. The older detective approached Vincent, lowering his voice. "You want to tell me how you knew?" Vincent met his gaze steadily. "A child asked for help." He said, "I listened." The detective studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "You might want to step back. This part's ours now." Vincent did, retreating just enough to give space without leaving. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Marcus. He answered without hesitation. Vinny, Marcus said, his voice warm, familiar. Wrong? Heard things got messy at Romano's. Vincent's jaw tightened. You knew, he said flatly. A chuckle. I had a feeling. You always had a soft spot for lost causes. Those were people, Vincent replied, not cargo. Silence stretched, thin and dangerous. You made a choice tonight, Marcus finally said. One that cost you? Vincent closed his eyes briefly. This isn't over. It never is, Marcus said, and the line went dead. Tony stepped up beside him, his expression grim. Pier 47, he said quietly. It's empty. Everything's gone. Vincent nodded slowly, the weight of it settling into him. He had been outplayed, distracted at the one moment he could not afford to be. By the time he looked back toward Maria and Emma, the police were leading the traffickers away, and paramedics were kneeling beside them. Emma looked up and caught Vincent's eye. She did not smile. She only nodded once. Vincent understood the gesture perfectly. Gratitude without celebration. Trust without illusion. The kind of understanding forged in moments that changed people forever. As the restaurant filled with flashing lights and murmurs, Vincent knew one truth with absolute clarity. He had lost a fortune, but he had drawn a line that could not be erased. And somewhere, in the shadows beyond this night, consequences were already moving toward him. Dawn arrived without softness. The city outside Vincent's penthouse windows glowed pale and indifferent, as if nothing extraordinary had happened the night before. Traffic resumed. People hurried to work. Somewhere, coffee was being poured and newspapers unfolded, already out of date. Vincent stood motionless, watching the skyline, feeling the quiet weight that followed decisions which could not be undone. Tony waited a respectful distance behind him. Hospital called. He said, Mother and kid are safe. No serious injuries. Vincent nodded once. Relief came, but it did not bloom. It settled, heavy and restrained. Safety was only the beginning. Survival was longer and far more complicated. They're being transferred to a protected location. Tony continued. Police are calling it a kidnapping case. Trafficking charges pending. And Marcus Vincent asked. Tony hesitated. He vanished again. Clean this time. Vincent exhaled slowly. Of course he had. Marcus had always been better at disappearing than anyone Vincent knew. That was what made the betrayal cut deeper. He had not simply sold people. He had built a system that depended on men like Vincent staying exactly where they were. Leave me, Vincent said. Tony did not argue. He rarely did. When the door closed, Vincent finally turned away from the window. His reflection in the glass looked older than it had the night before. Not because of age, but because of clarity. Once you saw something clearly, you could never unsee it. His phone vibrated again. A blocked number. He answered without speaking. They'll be moved by noon, came Morrison's voice. Stripped of humor. New identities. New state. Your name won't be in the report. I didn't ask for that, Vincent said. No, Morrison replied. But you earned it. Vincent ended the call and stared at the phone for a long moment before setting it down. He had spent decades buying silence, burying names, controlling outcomes. Last night had not been control. It had been surrender, to impulse, to conscience, to a child who had looked at him and seen something he was not sure existed. A knock sounded at the door. Vincent stiffened, instincts snapping into place. He crossed the room silently and opened it. Maria stood there. She looked smaller without fear holding her upright, wrapped in a borrowed coat, her dark hair loosely tied back. There was a faint bruise on her wrist, yellowing already, like a shadow refusing to fade. Behind her, a uniformed officer waited in the hallway, posture casual but alert. I asked to see you, Maria said quietly. Vincent stepped aside without a word. She entered slowly, as if expecting the space to resist her. Her eyes moved across the penthouse, taking in the clean lines, the quiet luxury. It was not awe that crossed her face, but confusion. This was not the home of a monster. That unsettled her more than if it had been. She's resting, Maria said, as if she needed to justify being here alone. Emma, They gave her something to help her sleep. "I'm glad," Vincent replied. Silence stretched between them, delicate and unsure. Maria clasped her hands together, then released them, then clasped them again. Finally, she looked up at him. "Why did you help us?" she asked. Vincent did not answer immediately. The truth had many edges, none of them clean. "Because someone asked," he said at last. "That's not enough," Maria said softly. He met her gaze. It was... She studied him, searching for deception and finding none. Her expression shifted, something like anger flickering through the gratitude. "Do you know what happens to people who get involved with men like you?" Vincent's mouth curved slightly, without humor. "Yes. I don't want to owe you," she said. "I don't want Emma thinking this is how the world works. That you need powerful men to save you." Vincent nodded. "You don't owe me anything. That's not how it feels." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." Another silence, this one softer, less afraid. "I came to say thank you," Maria said finally. "Not because I have to, because I want to." Vincent inclined his head. "You're welcome." She turned to leave, then hesitated at the door. "They said we'll be gone today. Somewhere new. Somewhere safe." "That's good," Vincent said. Maria paused, then asked the question she had been holding back. "Will they come after us?" Vincent did not lie. "Not if I'm still breathing." Something in his tone settled her. She nodded once and left, the officer following close behind. Vincent closed the door and stood there long after they were gone. By nightfall, the city felt different. Word traveled quickly in Vincent's world, even when no one spoke openly. Deals stalled. Phones rang and went unanswered. Allies hesitated. Enemies watched. Marcus called again just after midnight. "You're destabilizing things," Marcus said, irritation bleeding through his charm. "People are nervous." "They should be," Vincent replied. "You always said emotions were liabilities." "They are," Vincent said. "So is trust." A pause. Then, quietly, "I didn't expect you to choose them." Vincent's voice hardened. "You shouldn't have put me in a position to choose." When the call ended, Vincent poured himself a drink he did not touch. He stood alone in the dim light, listening to the city breathe beneath him. For the first time in his life, he had done something that could not be undone, bought off, or buried. And somewhere far away, a woman and her child were starting over because of it. That knowledge did not bring him peace. It brought him purpose. And purpose, Vincent knew, was far more dangerous. The first shot was not a bullet. It was silence. Vincent noticed it in the way calls stopped coming, in how familiar names no longer lit his phone. Clubs that once welcomed him closed their doors politely. Suppliers delayed shipments with thin excuses. The city had not turned against him. It had stepped back. The way animals did before a storm they did not yet understand. Tony confirmed it before noon. "Marcus is moving," he said, quietly. "He's offering incentives to anyone willing to distance themselves from you." Vincent adjusted his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. "Let them take the money." "That's it?" Tony asked. "They always do," Vincent replied. "Then they'll learn what it costs." But the cost was already arriving. That afternoon, a warehouse on the east side went up in flames. Not one of Vincent's, but close enough to carry a message. No casualties, no claims, just smoke rising like a warning finger pointed at the sky. By evening, Vincent received what Marcus truly wanted him to have: a photograph. It appeared on his phone without a number attached. Maria and Emma caught mid-step as they entered a grocery store somewhere sunlit and ordinary. The angle was distant, professional, proof of reach, proof of restraint. Tony swore under his breath. They said the location was secure. It was, Vincent said calmly, until Marcus decided to remind me he still can. Another message followed. This one text. "You can't protect them forever." Vincent closed his eyes, the words pressing against him with the weight of consequence. He had promised Maria safety. Not comfort, not peace, safety. And now that promise had been challenged. He typed a single reply. You touch them, and there will be nothing left of your world. The response came almost immediately, a threat from a man who just discovered his conscience. Vincent smiled thinly. Night fell heavy and restless. Vincent stood on the balcony again, the city lights flickering like 1,000 secrets below. He did not notice Tony approaching until the man spoke. "There's more," Tony said. Vincent did not turn. "Go on." They traced the burner signal. The photo wasn't sent to scare you. Vincent's eyes sharpened. "Then why?" "Because someone wanted you to see where they are," Tony said, "and realize you can't stay away." Vincent exhaled slowly. Of course, Marcus did not simply want obedience. He wanted Vincent compromised, drawn back into the game through the one vulnerability he had not yet learned to hide. Across the city, Maria stood at the kitchen sink of a small rented house, staring out at a backyard that did not yet feel like hers. Emma sat at the table, coloring quietly, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. The normalcy felt unreal, like a borrowed costume. When the knock came, Maria froze. Emma looked up. "Mom, stay here," Maria said softly. She moved toward the door on instinct alone, every warning in her body screaming at once. When she opened it, relief and fear collided so sharply she nearly swayed. Vincent stood on the porch. He looked out of place in the quiet neighborhood, dressed simply, without the armor of wealth or reputation. Just a man, serious and tired, his eyes dark with urgency. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I should have stayed away." Maria's voice trembled despite her effort. "Then why are you here? Because staying away is no longer keeping you safe." Behind her, Emma appeared in the hallway. Her face lit up with recognition, then stilled when she saw the tension in her mother's shoulders. Vincent lowered himself slightly, meeting Emma's gaze. "Hi," he said gently. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Hi." Maria stepped aside without realizing she had decided. Vincent entered the house, the door closing softly behind him. For a moment, none of them spoke. The quiet was too thin to trust. "They found us," Maria said finally. "Yes," Vincent replied. "And they will again." Emma looked between them. "Is it the bad man?" she asked. Vincent chose his words carefully. "Yes." Maria's hands clenched. "I won't run again. I'm not asking you to," Vincent said. "I'm asking you to let me end this." Maria laughed bitterly. By killing him, Vincent met her eyes. By stopping him. She searched his face, looking for the monster everyone warned her about. What she saw instead unsettled her more deeply. Resolve, guilt, something like care. "You said we didn't owe you," she said quietly. "You don't," Vincent replied. "This is about me." Emma set her crayon down and walked over, taking Vincent's hand without asking. The contact startled them both. "You said you'd protect us," she said simply. Vincent's throat tightened. "I will." Maria closed her eyes, the fight draining out of her. "Then don't lie to me," she said. "Whatever happens. Don't turn this into something Emma has to survive alone." Vincent nodded once. "I won't." Later. As Emma slept, Maria stood with Vincent on the back porch, the night air cool and uncertain. "If you win," she asked softly. "What happens to you?" Vincent looked out into the dark. "People like me don't win." He said, "We finish." Maria did not move away. She rested her arm lightly against his, a quiet act of defiance against fear. For the first time since this began, Vincent felt something dangerously close to hope. Miles away, Marcus watched the same city lights and smiled. Vincent had stepped exactly where he wanted him. And the endgame, at last, had begun. Vincent did not sleep that night. He sat at the small kitchen table long after Maria had gone upstairs, a single lamp casting a muted circle of light. The house smelled faintly of soap and crayons, of something fragile and painfully ordinary. It was not a place meant for men like him. That truth pressed against his chest harder than any threat Marcus had ever made. At 3:12 a.m., his phone vibrated once. "Tony, he's ready." Vincent typed back only 2 words. Then, "So am I." By dawn, the house was surrounded by quiet movement, not guards in black suits or armed convoys that announced danger. These men blended into the morning, Parking cars down the street, pretending to jog, to walk dogs, to live lives that did not involve violence. Vincent had chosen them carefully. Loyalty mattered now more than firepower. Maria watched from the upstairs window, her arms wrapped around herself. She understood enough to know this was not protection alone. This was preparation. "You're turning my life into a battlefield," she said later, her voice steady but edged with fear. Vincent met her gaze. "I'm ending one." She wanted to argue. She wanted to demand guarantees he could not give. Instead, she asked the question that had been building since the moment he appeared on her porch. "What does this cost you?" Vincent did not answer immediately. He looked toward the living room, where Emma sat on the floor assembling a puzzle, humming softly to herself. "Everything," he said at last. Maria swallowed. "Then don't lose." The meeting took place underground, a private garage beneath an abandoned hotel, chosen for its echoes and its lack of witnesses. Marcus arrived first, calm as ever, leaning casually against a concrete pillar, as if this were a reunion, not a reckoning. His smile was intact, but his eyes were sharpened by anticipation. "Vincent," he said warmly when he appeared, "you always preferred dramatic entrances. You always preferred hiding behind them." Vincent replied. They faced each other in the low light, two men who knew each other too well. Tony stood a few steps behind Vincent, silent and watchful. Marcus's men mirrored the stance, hands loose, bodies ready. "You've complicated things," Marcus said, shaking his head. "All this for one woman and a kid who won't even remember your name in 10 years. Vincent's voice was level. "They already will." Marcus's smile faltered for the first time. "That's what scares you, isn't it? That they'll remember you as something you're not." "I know exactly what I am," Vincent said. "That's why this ends tonight." Marcus laughed softly. "You think killing me fixes this? You think my network disappears because you feel guilty?" Vincent replied, "I think you disappear because you underestimated what I'm willing to burn." He nodded once. The lights came on. Floodlights flared to life, blinding and merciless. Hidden doors slammed shut. The echo of metal rang through the space as armed units emerged from the shadows. Not Vincent's men, not Marcus's. Law enforcement. Marcus spun, fury replacing charm in an instant. "You called the cops, I made a choice," Vincent said. Gunfire erupted anyway. Chaos shattered the space as Marcus's men reacted on instinct. Bullets tearing through concrete, sparks flying. Vincent moved without hesitation, pulling Tony down as rounds cracked overhead. The noise was deafening, violence compressed into seconds that felt endless. When it stopped, Marcus was on his knees, hands bound, blood streaking his temple. He looked up at Vincent, breathing hard, disbelief etched across his face. "You'd rather destroy everything we built," he said hoarsely, "than live with who you are." Vincent stepped closer, his voice low. "I destroyed what you turned it into." Marcus laughed then, bitter and broken. "She changed you." Vincent did not deny it. By the time Vincent returned to the house, the sun was already sinking, painting the sky in colors too gentle for what the day had taken. Maria was waiting on the porch. She did not ask questions. She searched his face, reading what words could not say. "It's over," she asked. "For you." Vincent said, "Yes." She stepped forward before fear could stop her and wrapped her arms around him. The embrace was brief, uncertain, but real. Vincent closed his eyes, breathing her in, grounding himself in the warmth of someone still unbroken. Emma appeared behind her, watching quietly. Vincent knelt, meeting her at eye level. "The bad man can't hurt you anymore," he said. Emma studied him, then nodded solemnly. "Are you still scary?" Vincent smiled faintly. "Sometimes. That's okay," she decided. "You were scary for the right reasons." As night fell, Vincent stood alone at the edge of the yard, the house glowing softly behind him. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He had chosen to expose himself to save others. And for the first time, he wondered if redemption was not something granted at the end, but something fought for, one impossible decision at a time. The city did not celebrate endings. There were no headlines about Marcus's arrest that mentioned names like Vincent's. Networks collapsed quietly, absorbed into investigations that would take years to finish. Some men vanished, others talked. A few tried to bargain. Vincent watched it all from a distance, his influence dissolving by design, assets transferred, accounts sealed, doors closing one by one behind him. Power had always been loud in his life. Letting it go was not. Weeks passed. The house changed. Laughter returned in small, hesitant increments. Emma learned the creak of the stairs and stopped flinching at it. She taped drawings to the refrigerator. Bright suns and uneven houses that leaned but never fell. Maria planted herbs in the backyard, her hands relearning patience as green pushed through soil. Ordinary moments stitched themselves together, fragile but persistent. Vincent remained careful. He slept lightly. He checked locks twice. He stood by the window at night longer than necessary, listening to a world that still knew his name even if it no longer feared it. He did not touch a gun unless Tony insisted. He did not raise his voice. He did not disappear without explanation. Maria noticed everything. "You don't have to stay," she said one evening as they washed dishes side by side, the warm water fogging the window. "You've done enough." Vincent dried his hands slowly. "I know, but you are staying." "Yes." She looked at him then, really looked, searching for the bargain hidden behind his answer. "Why?" He did not dress the truth in strategy, because this is the first place I've been where leaving feels like running. The admission settled between them, heavy and honest. Maria turned back to the sink, blinking once too many times. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Then stay." But not as someone who's waiting to leave. The nights grew gentler. Sometimes Vincent read to Emma before bed, his voice steady, careful with the endings. Sometimes Maria sat on the porch with him, shoulders touching, saying nothing. They did not rush what was forming. They did not name it. They let it breathe. A letter arrived in early spring. It bore no return address, only Vincent's name and handwriting he recognized. He opened it alone, standing at the kitchen counter. The house quiet around him. "You won," Morrison had written, or as close as men like us get. "The cases are moving forward, no blowback, no loose ends that point your way. Whatever you're building now, keep it small, keep it clean." Vincent folded the letter and burned it over the sink, watching the paper curl into ash. He felt no triumph, only relief. That night, Maria found him sitting on the back steps, staring at the dark. She sat beside him without asking. "Bad news," she said. "No," Vincent replied. "The kind that lets you sleep." She smiled faintly. "Then come inside." He did. The moment came without ceremony. A rainy afternoon. Emma at a friend's house, the sky pressing low and gray. Maria stood in the doorway, watching Vincent pace with quiet restlessness he could not quite hide. "You're still waiting for something to go wrong," she said. He stopped. "I don't know how not to." She stepped closer. "Then learn." She kissed him. It was not dramatic. It did not rewrite the world. It was careful and unsure and real. Vincent's hands trembled before they settled at her waist, grounding himself in the truth of her presence. When they parted, Maria rested her forehead against his. "We don't have to promise forever," she whispered. "Just honesty." Vincent nodded. "That I can do." When Emma came home later, she took one look at them and frowned thoughtfully. "You're different," she declared. Maria laughed softly. "Is that bad?" Emma considered it, then shook her head. "No, it's better." Summer arrived like forgiveness. The house filled with light. Vincent learned routines that had nothing to do with danger. Grocery lists, school schedules. Morning coffee shared in silence that felt earned. He still had scars. He always would. But they no longer defined every step he took. One evening, as the sun dipped low and gold, Vincent stood at the fence watching Maria and Emma chase fireflies in the yard. Emma's laughter rang out, bright and unguarded. Maria looked back at him, her smile easy, unafraid. Something inside Vincent loosened. For the first time, the future did not look like a threat. It looked like a place he was allowed to stay. And in that quiet, hard-won stillness, Vincent understood that happiness was not a miracle. It was a choice, made every day, to remain where love had found him, arrived gently, without asking permission. Leaves gathered along the fence line, gold and rust, and Emma made a game of stepping only on the red ones, declaring the yellow unlucky for reasons that changed daily. Maria laughed more easily now. Vincent noticed the way laughter reshaped a face, how it left traces even after it faded. He noticed many things he had once ignored. The city still existed. It always would. But it no longer dictated the rhythm of his days. Vincent sold the penthouse quietly. No farewell. No nostalgia. He moved what remained of his legitimate holdings into a trust he barely glanced at, delegating the rest. Tony stayed close but learned, slowly, to step back. Loyalty, Vincent had learned, did not always mean proximity. One evening, as the house settled into its familiar hush, Maria found Vincent in the garage, staring at a car he no longer drove. "You don't have to erase everything," she said gently. He looked up, surprised. "I'm not—" "You're choosing?" she corrected. "There's a difference." Vincent closed the hood and wiped his hands. "I spent years thinking survival meant leaving nothing behind. And now it means staying," he said, "even when it's harder." They stood there for a moment, the space between them easy, no urgency, no fear pressing at the edges. When Maria reached for his hand, he took it without hesitation, the gesture no longer feeling like a risk. The past did try, once, to knock. A man appeared at the edge of the neighborhood one afternoon, watching too long, asking questions too carefully. Vincent noticed before anyone else did. He did not confront him. He made a call, a single one, calm and precise. The man never returned. That night, Vincent told Maria everything, not in detail, not in confession, but in truth. She listened without interruption. When he finished, she said only, "Thank you for trusting me." Emma's school held a small performance in December, a crooked stage, paper snowflakes, children reciting lines too loudly or too softly. Vincent sat in the second row, hands folded, heart strangely unsteady. When Emma spotted him, she waved with reckless enthusiasm. Afterward, she ran to him, breathless. "Did you hear me?" "I heard everything," Vincent said. She studied him, serious. "Even the part where I forgot, especially that part." She smiled, satisfied. Later that night, as snow began to fall, Maria stood at the window, watching the quiet street. Vincent came up behind her, resting his hands lightly at her waist. She leaned back into him, the motion instinctive now. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. The power Vincent considered. No. The certainty. He paused. "Sometimes." She turned, facing him fully. "I can't promise this will always be easy." Vincent met her gaze. "I don't want easy." He reached into his pocket then, slower than the stories made it, careful not to turn the moment into theater. When he knelt, Maria's breath caught despite herself. "This isn't repayment," he said quietly, "and it isn't rescue. It's a question." She was already crying, smiling through it. "You don't have to finish." He did anyway. "Will you choose this life with me not because of what I was, but because of who I'm trying to be?" Maria nodded, hands trembling as she pulled him to his feet. Yes. The wedding was small. No guest list that needed vetting. No speeches filled with coded language. Just a backyard, string lights, borrowed chairs, and vows spoken plainly. Tony stood off to the side, uncomfortable but smiling. Morrison sent a card with no return address. Emma walked Maria down the aisle. Life, afterward, did not become perfect. It became real. There were arguments about nothing and everything. There were nights Vincent woke too early, listening for sounds that no longer came. Maria learned when to hold him and when to let him work through it alone. Emma learned that adults could be strong and gentle at the same time. One spring afternoon, Vincent stood at the same fence where he had once watched fireflies and felt the future loosen its grip. Maria joined him, resting her head against his shoulder. Emma played nearby, building something crooked and proud. "You know," Maria said, "she tells people you're boring." Vincent smiled. High praise. Emma looked up. "You are boring," she confirmed. "But you stay." Vincent met her eyes. "That's the plan." As the sun dipped low, casting the yard in gold, Vincent felt a quiet certainty settle into him. Not triumph, not absolution. Something steadier. He had not been saved. He had chosen, again and again, to remain where love had found him. And that choice, he knew now, was the happiest ending a man like him could earn.